Devon Ashworth was 38 years old, and until that afternoon, he believed he was building something real. He was a senior logistics manager who left work before sunrise most mornings, paid every bill without complaint, and had spent 11 years being exactly the man he promised to be. His wife Camille ran a consulting business that barely covered lunch, but Devon never once made her feel small about it. That Tuesday, he left work 3 hours early to surprise her for their anniversary. Dinner reservation, a bracelet, a card he had written himself. He pulled into his driveway and noticed 2 unfamiliar cars at the curb. He walked through his own front door, and what he found stopped him cold. Camille, seated between 2 men on the sofa he paid for, a third man stretched out across from her, champagne open, her shoes off, her hand resting on another man's knee, laughing. In Devon's house, on their anniversary. She looked up and saw him standing there, and something in his eyes made every person in that room go completely still. Devon said nothing. He simply looked at his wife. And in that silence, he made a decision she would spend the rest of her life wishing she had seen coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The parking lot was empty when Devon arrived. That was how he liked it. 5:47 a.m. The sky still dark, streaked with the pale gray of a morning that hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. Devon pulled his car into his usual spot, 3rd row, end space, same place every day, cut the engine, and sat for a moment with his coffee. The cup was from home. A plain blue thermos, dented on one side from when he'd knocked it off the counter 2 winters ago. He'd never replaced it. He didn't mind the dent. Inside the distribution center, the overhead lights buzzed softly in the long corridor that led to the operations wing. Devon's boots made a steady sound on the polished floor. He nodded to Marcus, the overnight security guard, who was packing up his thermos to head home. "Morning, Devon." "Marcus, how'd the night run?" "Smooth. Bay 4 had a scanner issue around 2. Rodriguez logged it. I'll pull the report." He always pulled the report. That was the thing about Devon Ashworth. He pulled every report, read every log, and remembered what he read. His supervisor, Janet Chu, had told him once, half joking and half not, that he was the only person she had ever met who could find a discrepancy in a 200-line spreadsheet by feeling that something was off before he could even say what it was. She wasn't wrong. Devon's official title was Senior Logistics Operations Manager. What that meant in practice was that he was the reason things ran. Shipments moved on time. Routes got optimized. When a supplier missed a delivery window and the whole chain threatened to buckle, Devon was the one who rebuilt the schedule quietly and without drama. Usually before most of the team had finished their morning coffee. He had built that reputation one careful day at a time. 11 years in the company, started in the warehouse, worked the floor, learned every moving part from the ground up. Now he managed a team of 14 and answered directly to the regional director. He was not the loudest person in any meeting. He never needed to be. His desk was organized the way his mind was organized. Everything in its place, nothing wasted. He set his thermos on the coaster, opened his laptop, and began working through the overnight reports before anyone else arrived. By 7:15, the office had filled around him. People stopped at his doorway with questions, small problems, things that needed a second set of eyes. Devon handled each one in turn. Steady, unhurried, present. Ruben Okafor appeared at 11, dropping into the chair across from Devon's desk, with the easy familiarity of a man who had been doing exactly that for years. "You eat anything this morning?" Ruben asked. "Granola bar." "That's not food, Devon." "It has oats in it." Ruben shook his head and slid a wrapped sandwich across the desk. Devon accepted it without argument. That was their rhythm. Ruben talked. Devon listened. Ruben worried about small things out loud so Devon wouldn't have to carry them alone. It was a friendship built on 11 years of Thursday lunches, and the kind of steadiness that neither man ever commented on directly. Devon ate half the sandwich and thought about Camille. He had made the reservation 4 months ago. That was the kind of husband Devon was. Camille had mentioned the restaurant once, twice, actually, he'd counted, during separate conversations. The first time, she'd seen it in a magazine. The second time, she'd pointed to it through the car window as they drove past. She hadn't even finished the sentence. Devon had written the name on a notepad that night and made the call 3 days later. Table for two. 7:30. Their anniversary. The bracelet was in his jacket pocket right now, in a small gray box with a white ribbon. Simple. Elegant. He had picked it out himself. He was not a flashy man. He had never needed to be. At 2 in the afternoon, he shut down his computer, told Janet he was using the personal time he had accumulated, and walked to his car. He had already arranged coverage for the rest of his afternoon. Everything was in order. It always was. The neighborhood was quiet when he turned onto their street. Afternoon light coming through the oak trees in long, broken pieces. The kind of ordinary Tuesday afternoon that looked exactly like every other one. Then he saw the cars. 2 of them parked at the curb in front of the house. A white Escalade, clean and large, and a black Audi with a real estate company decal on the back window. Small, easy to miss. Devon's eyes moved over both vehicles slowly. His foot came off the gas, and the car rolled to a gentle stop in the driveway. He sat there a moment. He reached for his phone, started to pull up Camille's name. Then he stopped. It's a surprise. That was the whole point. He set the phone face down on the passenger seat, checked that the gray box was still in his jacket pocket. It was. He opened the door, stepped out into the afternoon, and walked toward his front door. The music hit him first, something heavy and bass-driven that pushed through the front door before he even had it fully open. Devon recognized it as the kind of music Camille played when he wasn't home. She knew he didn't like it rattling the walls. He had never made a big deal of it. He had simply mentioned it once, quietly, and she had nodded. And after that, she only played it loud when the house was hers alone. Or when she thought it was. The smell came next. Cologne. Rich and layered. More than one kind mixing together in the air of the front hallway. Devon stood in the doorway for just a moment, his hand still on the door handle, and breathed it in without moving. His eyes adjusted from the afternoon light outside to the dimmer warmth of the house. Then he heard the laughter. Camille's laugh. Full and open. The way she used to laugh with him a long time ago. He stepped inside. The living room opened up to his left. The sectional sofa, the one Camille had picked out from a showroom on the east side, the one Devon had written a check for without complaint because she lit up when she saw it, was occupied. Camille sat in the center of it, legs tucked to one side, shoes off, her bare feet pressed against the cushion Devon usually sat on. A man was on her left, another on her right. Her right hand rested on the knee of the man beside her with the ease of something that had been done before. Across the coffee table, a third man sat, leaned back in Devon's armchair, his ankle crossed over his knee, his arm draped along the back of the chair. The posture of a man entirely at home. The coffee table was covered. Take-out containers from somewhere expensive. An open bottle of champagne, half gone. 2 glasses. A throw pillow from the sofa sitting on the floor like it had been moved out of the way. Devon recognized the armchair man before Camille said a word. The real estate decal on the Audi. The listings Devon had glanced at during a sleepless night 6 months ago and never let himself look at again. The email address on a business card he had found once in a jacket pocket and put back without saying anything. Troy. The room froze the moment Camille saw Devon's face. The laughter cut off like a switch had been thrown. Troy straightened almost imperceptibly. The 2 men on either side of Camille shifted with the sudden stiff discomfort of people caught somewhere they understood. On some level, they should not be. Camille's hand came off the man's knee. Devon noticed that too. "Devon!" Her voice came out too fast. "Hey, you're home early. I wasn't expecting." "Camille." That was all he said. Her name. One word, low and even, carrying none of the shock she was bracing for, and all of something much harder to manage. She talked anyway. She always talked when she was nervous. Devon knew that about her. Words came out in a rush. Colleagues, a quick get-together. Troy had been helping her look into the home's current market value. Just information. Bryce and Kendall had stopped by, completely casual. Nothing to read into. Devon listened. He let her finish. Then he turned and walked to the kitchen. He took a glass from the cabinet, filled it at the tap, stood at the sink, and drank the entire glass slowly, looking at the small window above it that faced the backyard. The oak tree they'd planted in the second year of the marriage was still out there. He'd planted it himself on a Sunday afternoon, while Camille read on the porch. He remembered the sound of the shovel in the dirt. He set the glass down. He walked back through the kitchen doorway into the living room. 3 pairs of eyes tracked him. Camille had gone quiet. Devon looked at each man in turn. Not with anger. With the kind of unhurried attention that made people feel fully seen, and not entirely comfortable about it. "Troy," he said. Then, "Bryce. Kendall." He walked to the front door and opened it, held it wide. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Troy stood first. The other 2 followed. Nobody made eye contact with Devon on the way out. The door clicked shut behind them, and the music kept playing for a few seconds before Devon walked to the speaker on the bookshelf and turned it off. The silence was complete. Camille opened her mouth. "Don't talk to me tonight," Devon said. "Not unkindly. Precisely. I mean that." He walked down the hall. The bedroom door closed behind him. The lock turned with a soft, definitive sound. He sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. He did not cry. He did not put his fist through anything. He sat with his hands on his knees and his eyes open in the dark room, and he thought. The way he thought through a broken shipment chain, or a staffing gap, or a number in a spreadsheet that didn't line up. Methodical, patient, gathering. Camille knocked once, softly, around 9. He didn't answer. He reached for his laptop, opened it. The light from the screen lit his face in the dark bedroom as he opened a browser window and typed 2 words into the search bar. Troy Lattimore. Devon was already at the table when she came downstairs. He had been there for over an hour. The coffee was made, a full pot, not just a cup, which was what he made when he was settling in to think. His laptop was closed in front of him. His hands were wrapped around his mug. He was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, and he did not look like a man who had slept. Camille stopped in the kitchen doorway. She had dressed before coming down. Hair done, a soft blouse, the kind of outfit that said, "I am taking this seriously," without saying it out loud. Devon noticed all of it and said nothing. "Devon." Her voice was careful, measured. "Can we talk?" "Sit down," he said. She sat across from him. He did not offer her coffee. She got up and poured her own, then came back and folded her hands around the mug, the same way he had folded his, as though she was mirroring him on purpose. Maybe she was. "Last night wasn't what it looked like," she started. Devon looked at her. Just looked. His expression was not cold, not hard. It was simply still. The way a pond goes still right before the temperature drops. She kept going. "Troy is a contact, a professional contact. I've been thinking about getting some information on the house's value, just casually, not seriously. And he came by to talk through what the market looks like in this area. Bryce and Kendall are associates of his. They came along. I should have told you. I know how it looked, but there is nothing going on." Devon let the words land and settle. He did not argue with them. He did not pick them apart out loud. He simply waited until she was finished. And then he asked his one question. "How long have you known Troy?" A pause. Small, but there. About 6 months, Camille said. Maybe a little more. We connected through a networking event. It's been completely professional. Devon nodded slowly, the nod of a man absorbing information, filing it. Okay, he said. Her shoulders dropped a half-inch. He saw it. She thought the word meant, I believe you. It did not mean that. It meant nothing except that Devon had heard her and was done with this part of the conversation. He already knew about the email address. He had known for 2 years. He found the second phone in the pocket of her weekend bag. A pale blue device in a slim case that she had claimed, smoothly and without missing a beat, was a secondary line she used for client calls so she could keep things separated. You know how it is, Devon. Clients expect you to be available. He had accepted it. He had told himself it made sense. He had put it back where he found it and never mentioned it again. But he had seen the name on the screen before he put it back. A notification. A name he hadn't recognized. He had typed it into his phone's notes app that night, alone in the bathroom, and then he had done nothing with it. 6 months ago, unable to sleep, he had finally searched it, found a real estate website, found a contact page, found an email address that matched the one saved in Camille's phone under the name M. Collins. He had closed the laptop, gone back to bed, told himself it was circumstantial, told himself he was being paranoid, told himself the man he was, loyal, measured, fair, did not blow up his marriage over a name and an email address. He had been wrong about what fairness required. I need some air, Devon said. He stood, rinsed his mug in the sink, and set it in the drying rack. Don't wait on me. Devon. She was standing now, too. Can we please just… I'll have my phone. He picked up his keys from the hook by the door and walked out. Aunt Hattie's street was quiet in the mornings. Old trees, close-set houses, a neighborhood that had stayed the same for 30 years while everything around it changed. Devon had been coming here since he was 9 years old. He knew the way without thinking about it. Hattie opened the door before he knocked. She looked at his face and stepped aside. He sat at her kitchen table, the same round table with the same 4 mismatched chairs that had been there since his childhood. And she put coffee in front of him and sat across from him and waited. He told her everything, all of it, in the same order it had happened. He did not editorialize. He did not raise his voice. He simply told her the facts the way he would walk a new employee through a process, start to finish, leaving nothing out. Hattie did not interrupt once. When he finished, she stood, picked up his mug, refilled it from the pot on the counter, set it back in front of him, and sat down again. She looked at him for a long moment. You already know what you're going to do, she said. You came here so someone could confirm your right to do it. Devon was quiet. The clock on her wall ticked. Outside, a car passed slowly on the wet street. Then he nodded. Hattie reached for the phone on the counter and dialed. Petra Voss's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, clean-lined and quiet, with a view of the city Devon rarely thought about. The furniture was dark wood and gray fabric. Nothing decorative on the walls except her degrees and one framed print of a single horizontal line. The whole room said, "We handle serious things here." Devon sat across from her with a folder on the table between them. He had put it together the night before. Bank statements, tax returns, account summaries, everything he could print without accessing anything Camille managed separately. Petra had asked him to bring what he had. He had brought more than she expected. She was perhaps 50, with close-cropped gray hair and reading glasses she had not yet put on. She looked at Devon first, not the folder. Hattie speaks well of you, she said. Hattie doesn't say things she doesn't mean. Petra almost smiled. She put on her glasses and opened the folder. For the next 20 minutes, she was quiet. She moved through the documents steadily, pausing occasionally to mark something in pencil on a yellow legal pad beside her. Devon sat still. He had learned long ago that silence was not a problem to be filled. He watched her work and let her work. Then she stopped. She looked at one page, then turned back 2 pages and looked at another, then returned to the first. "Mr. Ashworth," she set the page flat and turned it toward him. "Do you recognize these transactions?" He leaned forward. A column of entries, each between $900 and $1,200. They stretched down the page in steady intervals, some weekly, some 10 days apart, 1 or 2 with a gap of 3 weeks before resuming. "These are from the joint savings account," Devon said. "Yes, and this pattern here," she tapped her pencil at the entries. "These amounts are not accidental. They are specifically structured to stay beneath the threshold that would trigger an automatic bank alert." Devon looked at the numbers. He thought about the hours those numbers represented, the early mornings, the overtime, the years. "How far back does this go?" he asked. "Based on what you've brought me, 22 months. She set her pencil down. "I want a forensic bookkeeper to go through this completely before we draw conclusions. But the preliminary total from these statements alone is close to $34,000. The numbers sat in the air between them. Devon did not move. He felt something shift in his chest. Not collapse, not explosion, just a slow, pressurizing weight settling into place, like a load finding its final position. He had suspected dishonesty. He had not suspected this level of planning. "Where did it go?" he said. "That's exactly what we're going to find out." The forensic bookkeeper Petra referred him to was named Sandra Chu, and she worked fast. 4 days later, Devon was back in Petra's office for a phone call with Sandra on speaker, listening to her trace the money in clear, methodical steps. Account to account, LLC to property record. The $34,000 had funded a down payment on a short-term rental property, a 2-bedroom unit in a converted building 40 minutes from Devon's house. The purchase was finalized 11 months ago. The co-owner on the deed was Troy Lattimore. Devon was quiet on the drive home. He took the long way, through streets that required attention, making turns that kept his hands busy and his mind from spinning in one place too long. He parked in the driveway. He sat in the car for a few minutes with the engine off. She had not simply taken a lover. She had taken his money and built a future with it. She had sat across from him at their kitchen table and eaten meals he paid for and slept in a house he owned and done all of it while quietly preparing to leave him with nothing but the confusion. He went inside. Camille was in the living room watching something on television. She looked up when he came in. "Hey," she said. Her voice was careful but lighter than it had been, like she had decided the worst of the storm had passed. "Hey," he said. He held up the takeout bag in his hand. "Got Thai? There's extra rice?" Her shoulders relaxed. "That sounds good." They ate at the kitchen table. Devon asked about her day. She told him. He listened and responded in the right places. He was, to all appearances, a man making his way back toward normal. Not forgiven, not forgotten, but moving. After dinner he cleaned up, told Camille he had some work to look over, and went to his home office. He sat at his desk for a moment in the quiet, then picked up his phone. Reuben answered on the second ring. "Hey," Reuben said. Then, reading something in the single syllable, "You okay? I need you to tell me something honestly." A pause. The kind of pause that meant Reuben already knew what was coming. "8 months ago," Devon said. "Downtown. Did you see something?" The silence that followed was longer. When Reuben spoke, his voice was low and tired, like a man setting down something he had been carrying a long way. "Yeah," he said. "I did. It was a restaurant on 5th. Camille and a man I didn't recognize. They were at a corner table. Hands across the table, Devon. He stopped. "I didn't know how to tell you. I kept thinking I'd find the right way, and I never did. I'm sorry. I should have." "What did he look like?" Reuben described him. Devon recognized the description before Reuben finished the sentence. "Troy." "You don't need to apologize," Devon said. "I mean that. I should have told you." "Yes," Devon said. Not unkindly, just honestly. But I'm telling you now, it's not on you, okay? He heard Reuben exhale. They talked for a few more minutes, nothing heavy, and then Devon said goodnight and hung up. He sat in his office with the door closed. He opened the desk drawer and took out a fresh yellow notepad. He uncapped a pen and wrote a date at the top of the first page. Then he started writing. Names in one column, dates in another, amounts down the center, events along the right margin, the restaurant, the phone, the visits to the house, the property, the timing of all of it laid out in lines that connected to other lines. He worked in silence. The house was still around him. Somewhere down the hall, he could hear the faint sound of the television. He wrote until past midnight. Devon called Petra at 7:45 the next morning, standing in the parking lot of a gas station 2 blocks from his house. He did not want to make the call from inside. "I want to retain the investigator," he said. "Whoever you trust." I had a feeling. There was no judgment in her voice. Just the sound of a woman pulling up a contact on her computer. "His name is Marcus Webb. He's thorough, and he's discreet. I'll make the introduction today. What do you need from me?" "A signed authorization and a retainer. I can have the paperwork ready by 10. I'll be there." He stopped back at the house first. Camille was still asleep. He showered, changed, made coffee, left a cup on the counter for her, and was out the door before she stirred, just like any other morning, just like a man with nothing on his mind but work. That was the part she kept misreading, his routine. She saw it and decided it meant she was safe. The 2 weeks that followed were the strangest of Devon's life, not because they were chaotic, but because they were so completely ordinary on the surface. He came home at reasonable hours. He cooked twice. He watched a game on Sunday with the volume low. He asked Camille how her client calls went and listened to the answers. She began to settle. He could see it happen gradually, like a person testing ice after a thaw. One careful step, then another, until she trusted the ground again. By the end of the first week, she was laughing at something on her phone at the dinner table. By the end of the second, she had stopped being careful about which phone she picked up first when a notification came through. Devon noticed. He noted the date in his yellow notepad. He said nothing. Marcus Webb delivered his report on a Thursday morning. Petra called Devon at work to let him know it was ready. "Do you want to come to the office?" she asked. "Can you send it encrypted?" "Yes. Send it," Devon said. "I'll call you after." He did not open it at his desk. He told his assistant he had an errand and drove to a parking garage 4 blocks from his office building. He went to the 3rd level, pulled into an empty row near the far wall, put the car in park, and opened the document on his phone. He read it slowly. Marcus Webb was thorough. The report was dated, sourced, and formatted with the precision of a man who understood that every line might eventually be read by a judge. Time-stamped photographs, plate numbers, location records pulled from a series of confirmed sightings. Troy Lattimore had entered the marital home, Devon's address, on 14 separate occasions over the past 14 months. The visits occurred on weekdays, during hours when Devon was confirmed to be at work. The shortest was 40 minutes. The longest was just over 3 hours. 3 of the visits had occurred within the past month. One had occurred 9 days ago. 9 days ago, Devon had been in a logistics review that ran 2 hours over schedule. He had texted Camille to say he'd be late. She had responded, "No worries, I'm just home. Take your time." He set the phone down on his thigh for a moment. Then he picked it up and kept reading. Near the end of the report, in a section labeled Additional Findings, Marcus Webb had documented a separate incident. 4 months ago, a Tuesday in the early afternoon, Troy Lattimore's car had been observed parked outside Camille's Pilates studio. Camille exited at 12:40. She got into Troy's car. The car drove to an office building on the west side of town, 17 minutes from their neighborhood. Webb had included the building's name in the report. Devon recognized it. He had passed it a dozen times without ever having reason to stop. It was a law office, not Petra's firm. A different one. Devon searched the building's tenant directory on his phone and cross-referenced the floor number in the report. Family law. Divorce. Initial consultations by appointment. Devon sat in the parking garage and did not move. Not for 45 minutes. He was not crying. He was not shaking. He was sitting very still in the driver's seat, with both hands resting flat on his thighs, staring at the concrete wall in front of him, while the full shape of it assembled itself in his mind like a loading image coming into focus, piece by piece, until the picture was complete and undeniable. She had a plan. She had been building one. The money, the property, the attorney, all of it was the infrastructure of an exit she had designed on her own timeline, at her own pace, with his resources. He was not supposed to find out. He was not supposed to come home early. He was supposed to arrive one day to papers and a story she had already prepared, in a position she had already chosen for him. He started the car. He drove to Hattie's house without calling first. She had dinner ready. Pot roast, rice, green beans with a little garlic the way he liked them. She did not ask him how he knew to come, and he did not ask her how she knew to cook. They ate at the kitchen table. She talked a little, about her neighbor's new dog, about a book she'd started and abandoned, small things that filled the space without demanding anything from him. He ate. He was grateful for the food and for the absence of pressure. When the plates were cleared and the dishes were done and the kitchen was quiet, Devon leaned against the counter with a dish towel in his hand and looked at the floor. She was building an exit, he said. Hattie folded her own dish towel and set it on the counter. She looked at him the way she always did, straight and without softness, but with something underneath that was entirely love. And she planned to leave you with nothing, she said. So we make sure she leaves with less. Devon was in Petra's office by 8:15. He set the folder on the desk first, then the PI report beside it. Then he folded his hands on top of both and looked at her. I want this to be airtight, he said. Every angle, every document. I don't want a single gap she can walk through. Petra pulled the folder toward her and opened it. She read the way Devon worked, quietly, completely, without interruption. He watched her eyes move down each page without expression. A minute passed, then another. She turned to the PI report and read that too. When she was done, she closed everything neatly and set it aside. First thing today, she said, you separate your direct deposits and open an individual account. Do not move any joint funds. Just redirect what hasn't landed yet. I can do that on my lunch break. Do it this morning. She picked up her pen. I also want to loop in a real estate attorney I work with. The property she co-purchased with Troy. Those funds were marital assets moved without your knowledge or consent. That is actionable. We file a formal claim against the property and assert misappropriation. Devon nodded slowly. And Troy? He gets served. Petra said it the way someone might note the weather. Just a fact. A thing that was going to happen. My colleague will move on that within the week. Devon sat with that for a moment. He thought about Troy, leaned back in his chair in Devon's living room, comfortable as a man in his own house. He thought about 40-minute visits, 3-hour visits. Take your time. Good, Devon said. That was all. He opened the individual bank account at 11:40 in the morning, seated at a small desk inside a branch location he had never used before, 12 miles from their neighborhood. The banker was efficient. Devon was pleasant. The whole thing took 22 minutes. He sat in his car afterward and called Wendell. His older brother picked up on the second ring. Hey, you got time to talk? Devon asked. I got time. Devon told him everything. He did not soften it, did not compress it, did not skip the parts that made him look like a man who should have seen it sooner. He told Wendell about the 3 men on the sofa, the $34,000, the 14 visits, The law office 4 months ago. Troy's name on the property deed. All of it, laid out plainly, in the order it happened. Wendell listened without saying a word. When Devon finished, there was a brief silence. "What do you need from me?" Wendell asked. "I need you here for the conversation." "When?" "Next weekend. I'll book it tonight." Devon exhaled once, slow and quiet. "I appreciate you." "Don't." Wendell's voice was steady. "Just tell me what time to land." Devon had called Yvette 2 days earlier to ask about lunch. He told her he needed to speak with her privately and that it was important. She had asked no questions. She simply named a restaurant she liked and said, "Noon on Thursday worked fine." She was already seated when he arrived. 71 years old, back straight, hands folded on the table, wearing a pale yellow blouse Devon had seen her in before. She looked up when he came in and gave him the same warm, measured look she always had. A look that held respect in it, in a way her daughters never quite did. They ordered. They made brief, polite conversation while the food arrived. And then Devon set down his fork and told her the truth. He told her about the money, the property, the affair, the private investigator's 14 documented visits. He told her about the law office, that her daughter had been consulting a divorce attorney 4 months before Devon ever came home early. He told her all of it in the same measured tone he used in every difficult meeting at work, because the steadiness was not performance. It was just who he was. Yvette did not interrupt. She did not look away. She sat with it the way a person sits with something they feel in their chest but cannot yet name, her face still and composed and quietly grieving in the way of someone receiving a truth they already half knew. When he finished, a silence settled over the table. Then she asked, "Does she know you know all of this?" "Not yet," Devon said. Yvette nodded once. She looked down at her plate. Then she looked back up at Devon, and something in her expression had gone very still and very decided, in the way of a woman who has made up her mind about something and will not be moved. She did not make him any promises. She did not ask him what he wanted her to do. She simply reached across the table and briefly pressed the back of his hand with hers. Then she picked up her fork. Camille mentioned over dinner that evening that they should probably talk soon. She said it lightly, like it was a casual thought that had occurred to her. Devon agreed. He said whenever she was ready was fine. He cleared the plates. Wendell came through the arrivals gate at 6:10 on Saturday evening, one bag over his shoulder, the same quiet way he moved through every room he entered. Devon drove. Neither of them spoke for the first several minutes. The highway stretched out ahead, the sun low and orange in the rearview mirror. Then Wendell asked, "You ready?" Devon kept his eyes on the road. "Been ready," he said. The kitchen was quiet in the morning. Devon had been up since 5. He made coffee, set 2 cups on the counter, and left Camille's where she could reach it. Then he sat at the table and waited. Wendell came downstairs at 5:45 without being asked. He poured his own cup, leaned against the far counter and said nothing. Devon looked at him once. That was enough. When Camille came down at 7:30 in her robe, hair loose, she stopped at the bottom of the stairs and took in the room. Devon seated at the table. Wendell standing near the doorway to the hall. The particular stillness of the air. Something moved behind her eyes. A small recalibration. Then she smiled, soft and careful, and moved toward the counter for her coffee. "Morning," she said. "Sit down, Camille," Devon said. Not harsh, not cold, just exact. She turned and looked at him. He was already watching her. The folder was on the table in front of him. Closed. She sat. Devon opened the folder. He did not slide it toward her. He looked down at the first page, then back up at her, and he began to speak. 22 months ago, he said, you started moving money from our joint savings, small amounts, irregular intervals, designed not to trigger any alerts. He turned the page so she could see it from across the table. columns of transfers, dates, amounts. $34,000 total. Camille's mouth opened. That money, Devon continued without pausing, funded the down payment on a short-term rental property. The property is co-owned. He turned to the next document. Troy Lattimore's name is on the deed. The color shifted in her face. Devon, I'm not finished. His voice did not rise. It did not harden. It was the same tone he used to address a shipping discrepancy or a missed deadline. Precise, unhurried, completely in command. He turned another page. Over the past 14 months, Troy Lattimore entered this house on 14 separate documented occasions while I was at work. 14. He let that number sit. Not to consult on property values, not for professional reasons. 14 visits. Documented. Camille was very still now. And 4 months before I came home early and found him sitting in my living room like he owned it. Devon turned to the final section. You visited a law office on Birchfield Avenue. Not Petra's firm. A different one. He looked up at her. You were already consulting a divorce attorney, Camille. You had a plan. You were going to leave when you were ready, with what you'd already moved, and let me find out after the fact. The silence in the kitchen was total. Then Camille shook her head. Slowly at first, then faster. That is not, Devon. That is not what happened. The money was... I was going to explain that. I was trying to... The property was an investment. It wasn't... Her voice climbed, unsteady. You're making this sound like something it isn't. Devon looked at her without expression. Then tell me what it is. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Tell me what $34,000 from our joint account going to a deed with his name on it is, Devon said. Tell me what 14 visits while I'm at work is. Tell me what the attorney's office is. Her eyes filled. I made a mistake. Her voice broke on the last word. I made a mistake, and I know that. And I'm sorry, Devon. I'm sorry. I didn't want it to happen like... I know you're sorry, he said. That's not what this is about. She pressed her hand to her mouth. The tears came properly now. Real ones, or real enough. Devon watched her the way he had watched every piece of documentation this past month. Steady, present, unmoved. He reached into the folder. One more thing, he said. He slid a single printed page across the table toward her. She looked at it without touching it first. Then, slowly, she picked it up. It was a letter, formal letterhead, from Troy Lattimore's attorney, addressed to Petra's office. Devon watched her eyes move across it. He watched the exact moment she understood what she was reading. That is Troy's formal legal position, Devon said. He had no knowledge the funds were marital assets. He relied entirely on representations made by you. His words, in writing. Devon's voice was quiet, unhurried, like he was reading a weather report. He gave you up, Camille. First chance he got. She lowered the page. She stared at the table. Devon closed the folder. He stood, smoothed the front of his jacket, and buttoned it. Petra will be in touch, he said. I strongly suggest you find a good attorney. He picked up the folder. He walked out of the kitchen. Wendell had not moved from the doorway the entire time. He had not said a single word. He looked at Camille now, not with anger, not with satisfaction, not with anything that could be named easily. Just a long, level look. The look of a man who sees clearly and has seen enough. Then he turned and followed his brother out the front door. The papers arrived on a Tuesday. Camille was in the kitchen when the knock came. 2 sharp raps, official and unhurried. She opened the door expecting a package. The man on the porch was not a delivery driver. He wore a plain jacket and held a manila envelope with her full name printed on the front in clean block letters. Camille Ashworth? She said yes before she thought not to. He handed her the envelope, noted something on a clipboard, and walked back to his car without another word. She stood in the open doorway for a moment. The morning was gray and cool. A neighbor's sprinklers ran in a slow, indifferent arc down the block. She closed the door and opened the envelope at the kitchen table. The filing was 26 pages. She read the first 4 and had to stop. It was all there, not summarized, not gestured at. Every transfer listed by date, amount, and destination. The property address, the deed, Troy's name beside hers, the private investigator's dates and times, the name of the law office on Birchfield Avenue, every single thing she had done, organized into clean columns and numbered paragraphs, stripped of every explanation she had ever planned to offer. She called her attorney, the one she had retained quietly 4 months ago. During a Tuesday afternoon, she told Devon was a client lunch. Sandra Pruitt. Competent, confident, exactly the kind of woman Camille had wanted in her corner when she was the one driving the timeline. Sandra answered on the second ring. "I saw the filing come through this morning," Sandra said. Her voice was measured in a way that was already telling Camille something. "We need to talk about your position. Tell me." A pause. Short, but not short enough. "Camille, what you described to me 4 months ago and what this filing documents are significantly different situations." Sandra's words were careful, deliberate. "At the time you retained me, you presented this as a standard marital dissolution with asset division. What Devon's team has filed includes a formal civil claim on the rental property, supported by documented fund transfers and—" Another pause. "A letter from Troy Lattimore's attorney that assigns full liability to you for the misrepresentation of those funds." Camille's hand tightened on the phone. "That letter is in the public filing?" "It is." The kitchen was very quiet. "What does my position look like?" Camille asked. Sandra told her. She was professional about it. She laid out the exposure clearly and without softening it much, because softening it would not have helped anyone. The civil claim on the property, the documented misappropriation, the consulting income that would not cover what was coming, the gap between what Camille had planned to walk away with and what she could now reasonably expect. When Sandra finished, Camille did not say anything for a long moment. "So he beat me," she said. Sandra didn't answer that. "I'll need a retainer increase to take this through litigation," she said instead. "We can talk numbers Thursday." Camille's mother called that afternoon. Yvette's voice was the same as always, steady and warm, with the particular weight of a woman who chose her words carefully because she understood that words, once said, could not be taken back. "I love you," Yvette said. "I need you to know that's not what this is about." Camille closed her eyes. "Mom? I had lunch with Devon," Yvette said. "He told me everything. He wasn't cruel about it. He wasn't asking me to take sides." A brief pause. "He just told me the truth. Quietly. The way he does things. The way he does things." Camille had lived with that quality for 11 years, and somewhere along the way had confused it for softness. "I can't give you money for this, baby." Yvette's voice did not waver. "You made deliberate choices. You planned them out. You had time, at every step, to stop." Another pause, shorter this time, like the words had already been decided. "I love you, but I will not be your way out of what you chose." The call lasted 4 more minutes. When it ended, Camille sat with the phone in her lap and stared at nothing. She called Troy that evening, then again the next morning, then twice more over the following 3 days. He did not answer. He did not return a single call. No text, no voicemail, nothing. His phone rang and delivered her directly to a generic recording that didn't even have his name on it anymore. The champagne, the afternoons, the way he used to sit across from her at that downtown restaurant, hands easy on the table, talking about the property, like it was the beginning of something, like she was the beginning of something. Gone. Cleanly, efficiently, completely gone. The moment his attorney's letter was in the public record, and her name was the only one carrying the weight, Troy Lattimore had simply stepped sideways, and disappeared, as though she had imagined him. By the end of the week, Camille was alone in the house Devon was no longer paying for. She sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Devon had opened the folder 9 days ago, and spread the legal documents out in front of her. 26 pages, the civil claim paperwork beside it, Sandra's notes from their Thursday call. The house was quiet around her, not peaceful quiet, not the quiet of a Saturday morning or an evening winding down, the quiet of a space that had been built and paid for and held together entirely by someone who was no longer in it. The conference room was on the 14th floor. Clean lines, gray carpet, a long table with water glasses nobody touched. Petra sat to Devon's left, her documents stacked and ordered. Sandra Pruitt sat across from them, Camille beside her. Devon had not seen Camille since the morning he walked out of the kitchen with Wendell. She looked put together. She would always look put together. That was one thing that would never change about her. Hair done, posture straight. She had dressed the way she always dressed for situations she needed to manage. Devon recognized it immediately. The careful presentation, the quiet performance of composure. He looked at her once when he sat down. Then he turned his attention to Petra and left it there. Not out of anger. Not to make a point. He simply had nothing left to say to Camille with his eyes. That chapter had already been written, documented, numbered, and filed. What was left now was arithmetic. Petra walked through the settlement terms with the calm efficiency of someone who had prepared for every possible objection and was mildly curious whether any would materialize. Devon's protected assets, retained in full. His individual accounts, separated weeks before the filing, untouchable. The marital home, ordered for sale, proceeds divided according to the court's framework, a framework that accounted precisely for the 22 months of transfers that had quietly drained what they had built together. Then, the rental property. Sandra offered 2 counterpositions. Petra addressed both of them in the same even tone she used for everything else. The forensic documentation was not ambiguous. Troy's attorney's letter was already in the public record. The judgment on the property claim would offset what Camille received from the marital estate. The number Sandra came back with, after a short recess and a murmured conversation with Camille that Devon did not try to hear, was lower than their opening position. Petra glanced at Devon. He gave a small nod. They signed at 2:47 in the afternoon. Devon shook Sandra's hand because it was the professional thing to do. He did not look at Camille again. Not from coldness, not from cruelty. There was simply nothing unresolved that required his eyes. He and Petra exchanged a few words in the elevator. She told him her office would handle the remaining filings. He thanked her, genuinely, and she accepted that with a quiet nod. That meant she understood exactly what this had cost him to get here. Wendell was waiting outside on the sidewalk. He was leaning against the building with his hands in his jacket pockets, watching the street with the easy patience of a man who had nowhere else he needed to be. Devon pushed through the glass door, and Wendell looked up. "Done?" Wendell said. "Done." Wendell nodded once. "Good." He straightened up and looked down the block. "I'm hungry. And I'm not ordering anything cheap." The restaurant was 3 blocks away, and more than either of them needed for a Tuesday afternoon, which was exactly why Wendell had chosen it. White tablecloths, bread that arrived without asking, a menu with no photographs. Wendell studied it for approximately 45 seconds and ordered the ribeye without a trace of apology. Devon ordered the salmon and a glass of water, and Wendell looked at the water like it had personally offended him. "You just won," Wendell said. "Order something." Devon almost smiled. "I am ordering something. Something real." Devon ordered a coffee. Wendell shook his head slowly, the way older brothers have shaken their heads since the beginning of time, and the server walked away trying not to laugh. They ate without much ceremony. Wendell talked about Atlanta, about a project at his job that had been testing his patience for 3 months, about a neighbor's dog that had apparently developed a personal grudge. Devon listened. He ate his salmon. He drank his coffee. And somewhere between Wendell's description of the dog and the story about the project, Devon laughed. A real one. Not polite, not controlled. The kind that arrived without permission and lasted a few seconds longer than he expected. He had forgotten what that felt like. Wendell pointed at him with his fork. There he is. Reuben arrived as they were finishing, slightly out of breath, jacket open, grinning in the way he grinned when he was relieved about something he hadn't said out loud. "I parked 4 blocks away," he announced, dropping into the chair across from Devon. "Nobody told me this street was a whole situation." He looked at the table. "Did you eat the bread already? Why is there no bread?" Wendell flagged the server down. More bread arrived. Reuben ordered coffee and a slice of whatever dessert the server recommended, which turned out to be something with chocolate and a name Devon couldn't pronounce. Reuben ate it without offering any to either of them, and declared it necessary. The 3 of them sat there until the lunch crowd thinned out, and the restaurant began quietly resetting itself for dinner service. They talked about nothing important, and everything true, the way that only happens with people who have known you long enough to skip the surface. Devon drove to Hattie's house as the evening came on. The lights were already on inside. The smell of food reached him on the porch before he even knocked. Something slow-cooked and warm, the particular smell of her kitchen that had meant safety since he was 9 years old. She opened the door before his hand found the knocker. "Figured it was today," she said, and stepped back to let him in. They ate at the kitchen table. The same chairs, the same window over the sink that let in the last flat light of the evening before full dark settled in. Hattie had made his favorite, pot roast with carrots and those small potatoes she always added, the ones that soaked up everything around them and came out tasting like comfort had a texture. Cornbread on the side. Sweet tea without being asked. They talked some. Not about the settlement, not at first. About the food. About a show she had been watching that she described as completely ridiculous and entirely compelling. About the neighbor 2 doors down who had repainted his shutters, a color she had strong feelings about. At some point, Devon told her how the settlement landed. The numbers, the property judgment, the moment Sandra Pruitt's counterposition came down in the 2nd round. Hattie listened with her fork moving steadily. When he finished, she said, "Petra's good. She's very good." Hattie nodded. "I know. I picked her." Devon smiled at his plate. After dinner, they did the dishes together. No different than they had done 100 times before. Hattie washed. Devon dried. The kitchen was warm and the radio was on low somewhere. Old music, the kind she kept on in the evenings. She handed him plates one at a time. He dried each one and set it back in its place on the shelf. The routine of it was its own kind of quiet, the kind that didn't need to be filled. The last plate was wide and white, one of the old ones she had kept for 30 years. She handed it to him and held on for just a half-second before letting go. "Your mother would be proud of how you handled this," she said. Devon dried the plate carefully. He held it a moment. "I know," he said. Devon woke before his alarm. That had been happening more often lately. Not the restless, grinding kind of early, the kind that used to pull him out of sleep with his jaw already tight and his mind already running through everything that needed managing. This was different. Clean, like his body had simply decided it had rested enough and was ready to start. He lay still for a moment, looking at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet, in the best way. Not the heavy, loaded quiet of the house at the end, the kind that sat on top of everything like a weight. This was just quiet. Morning quiet. The sound of a neighborhood he had always liked, waking up slowly outside his window. He got up. The apartment was not large. It did not need to be. Every room in it was exactly what it was supposed to be. Nothing performed. Nothing decorated for someone else's approval. Books on the shelves, organized the way he liked, which was not alphabetically or by color, but by the order in which he intended to read them. A kitchen that stayed clean because he used it and cleaned it. No other reason. A desk by the window where he kept his work laptop and, next to it, a yellow legal pad he used for thinking things through on paper. In the corner of the living room, pushed slightly to the side but not out of the way, sat the bookshelf project, or what would eventually be a bookshelf. Right now it was precise cuts of white oak laid out in careful order, a hand plane, a set of chisels he had researched for 2 weeks before buying, and a piece of sandpaper folded into quarters. He had been working on it most Saturday mornings for the past 6 weeks. He was not rushing it. That was the whole point. He made coffee, drank it standing at the kitchen window, and watched the street below. A woman walked a small dog with enormous ears. A man in a reflective vest rode a bicycle slowly against no particular wind. The light was the particular pale gold of early Saturday morning in October, low and unhurried. Devon finished his coffee and rinsed the mug. The regional director role had come with travel. 3 cities in the first quarter, 2 in the second. Hotel rooms and early flights and conference tables full of people who needed him to know what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. He had always known. The difference now was that he moved when the work called for it, without first calculating whether it would inconvenience someone who did not appreciate him being there in the first place. He had accepted the promotion in the same meeting it was offered. His supervisor had seemed mildly surprised by that. Devon had not explained. Reuben had taken him to lunch to celebrate, and spent the first 10 minutes pretending to be insulted that Devon would now be above him on the org chart, and the next hour being genuinely, uncomplicated proud. Every Thursday since, they ate together. It was a standing thing now. Reuben always had something going on that was either very funny or very exasperating, and Devon was never sure which it would be until he sat down. Wendell had come for the holidays and stayed 3 weeks. The extra week was unannounced. He had simply not booked a return flight when he was supposed to, and offered no real explanation. They had watched football, cooked, fixed a squeaking cabinet door Devon had been ignoring. Wendell had looked at the bookshelf project for a long time one morning without saying anything, and then said, "You're cutting that joint wrong." Devon told him he was not. Wendell pulled up a chair and watched him for 20 minutes in complete silence, and at the end said, "You're not cutting it wrong." Devon did not say anything. Wendell went and made sandwiches. Hattie called every Sunday morning at 9, without fail, and talked to him for however long she needed to. Sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes an hour. She asked about his work, his food, his sleep. She told him about her neighbors and her shows, and her opinions on things nobody had asked her to have opinions on. Devon listened to all of it. He did not think about Camille often. When he did, it arrived without heat. No anger, no bitterness, no residue of the kind that sticks to a person and changes the way they move through things. Just a clear recognition, like looking at an old receipt and understanding exactly what you paid and what you got for it, and knowing you wouldn't pay it again. He had not spoken to her since the settlement. He had not needed to. What he noticed most, in the 14 months since, was the weight he was no longer carrying. It was the kind of thing you only understood once it was gone. How much of his energy had been spent managing around someone, accommodating a shape that was never really his, funding a life built on a version of himself that had been edited down and never complained about the cuts. He was not edited anymore. The hardware store was 12 minutes from his apartment. He went early, before the weekend crowd arrived, and moved through the aisles with a list on his phone and no particular hurry. He needed 2 more lengths of oak dowel, a specific grade of finishing wax, and a set of clamps in a size he had measured twice before writing down. He found the first 2 quickly. The clamps took a few minutes longer. He crouched in the aisle reading the label on a package, checking the jaw width against the number in his phone. "Devon?" He looked up. She was standing at the end of the aisle with a small basket over one arm. One of Camille's friends, a woman named Dana, who had attended every dinner party, every gathering, every social occasion of his married life, with the particular coolness of someone who had already decided he was not interesting enough to bother with. She was looking at him now, the way people look when what they see does not match what they were expecting. He stood up, clamps in hand. "Dana," he said. "I almost didn't." She stopped, started again. "You look good." The surprise in her voice was not unkind, just honest. "How are you doing?" Devon smiled. It arrived without any effort at all. The real kind. The kind that started somewhere behind the eyes. "I'm well," he said. "Real well." She nodded, still slightly uncertain, like she had prepared for a different conversation, and this one had not gone the direction she anticipated. Devon held up the clamps briefly, the way a man does when he has what he came for. "You take care," he said. He walked to the register, paid for his materials, and pushed through the door into the morning light, pale gold and unhurried, the same as it had been when he stood at his kitchen window an hour ago. The air was cool and clean. His car was where he left it. The white oak was waiting at home. He put the bag in the passenger seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.